What I'm going to try and do in this short video is give you a brief overview of the Scrum framework, including its events, artifacts, and commitments. This is not meant to be a deep dive into each part of the framework, as that will come later in this series of videos. Whilst listening, you might find it helpful to have a printed version of the Scrum framework image in front of you to follow. The activity for this video is simply to annotate your printout as we proceed. Over the next few videos in this series, there is going to be a lot of information, so my advice is to write small. Even though it's considered a complementary practice to the Scrum framework, it's incredibly important that every product has a product vision. It's an idea, a hypothesis, or a problem that the product aims to solve by existing. The product goal, a strategic step on that road to the product vision, is expressed by the product owner. The product goal informs the work contained within the product backlog, which is the single source of work for the product. The product backlog is one of the artifacts in Scrum, and it contains within it Product Backlog Items. These Product Backlog Items are independent expressions of value that are ordered, sized, and have a description. This artifact is one of the inputs into the first event of a sprint, sprint planning. The purpose of sprint planning is to answer three questions: why, what, and how. The why takes the form of the sprint goal. Why is this sprint valuable? The product owner proposes an objective to the whole Scrum team, a hypothesis if you like, and the Scrum team then collaborate to define a sprint goal that explains why the sprint will be valuable to stakeholders. They talk about what is achievable and negotiate the art of the possible. Once the sprint goal is defined and committed to, the developers create a sprint backlog, a forecast of the product backlog items required to meet the sprint goal. It is this sprint backlog that answers the remaining two questions. What can be done this sprint by selecting product backlog items and putting them into the sprint backlog? And how will the chosen work get done? A plan by the developers of how to turn the sprint backlog into a usable increment. Every day during the sprint, the developers will meet for their daily Scrum. It is a 15-minute time-boxed activity for the developers to inspect the progress made on the sprint backlog and adapt it as needed. This frequent inspection and adaptation makes it more likely that the sprint goal will be met. Nearing the end of a sprint, the Scrum team will present the increment to the stakeholders with the purpose of eliciting their feedback in the sprint review. This feedback will likely be incorporated into the product backlog for future ordering and future work. But if the feedback doesn't align with the direction the product owner wants the product to take, they can just say no. This is more respectful than adding it into the product backlog if you know you won't do it. Importantly, only a done increment, that is, work that meets the definition of done, will be made available for inspection at the sprint review. The final event in the sprint is the Sprint Retrospective. It is an opportunity for all of the Scrum team to plan ways to increase their quality and effectiveness. They will likely cover the topics of individuals, interactions, processes, and tools, and it is also the most likely time when they will tighten their definition of done. This was an incredibly simple overview of the Scrum framework, the events, artifacts, and commitments. All of this happens within the container event of the sprint itself, which is time-boxed. That is to mean it will take no longer than one calendar month. I invite you now to continue this journey into the Scrum framework by looking at each part of Scrum that I have just mentioned in more detail.